Wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Esoteric Radio. Today is Sunday, January 29th, 2012, and I'm your host, Sevan Bomar, and I'm here to deliver you a unique message today. Of course, the show title today is Octagon Initiation, Oversouls, and Undersouls in 2012. And the title itself actually sparks off of a forum post that I'm putting together right now. And what this forum post is going to entail, I believe it's going to be one of the most expansive to date. But it's going to give you precise information about what is taking place in the reality and exactly what is necessary to understand, and overstand that. So that way your triangulation works out correctly so that you have the proper projection here in 2012. The first thing that I'm going to do before I get started in the show is ask, does it sound good? And I have already a comment in the chat box that says the sound is good from my good friend Luis, so I want to thank him for that. So we're going to go ahead and get started without interruption. Of course, it's like a train when we talk, or when, well, you could say we were in a collective, but it's like a train when we think at times, and the more that we think, the more things come together and then it becomes fluid. So I ask everyone, especially today, to give the train a moment to speed up, and then once it gets on the right track, then we're going to be headed into a whole vista of information. So what I want to tell you today is about how to program the reality and how to, program your reality and how to have that connection with what is taking place here in the reality. But before I do that, I just need to take a quick moment to clear a few things with my computer, and I'll just take a quick second. Okay, it looks like my sound and computer is clear here. Okay, so we're going to get into this, and of course this post stems again off of the Octagon initiation because it's something that I started to notice all around the dimension, which means I started to notice that the Octagon symbol was used not only by the elite, but also in many arenas where there was esoteric knowledge being translated, and mainly esoteric knowledge about getting in and out of the other world. And so the reality becomes for us is that what we have this opportunity to do is we have this opportunity to get more involved in the other world that has always been available to us. And this world that I'm speaking of is the dream world. However, where the dream world is actually positioned is something that we call fourth dimension. What fourth dimension is like basically our dream world of no time, where dream time is a lot different than real time in our world. So how this basically works is that you see these symbols that mean crossing over into the other world, but you don't understand exactly what they mean. And I'm going to show you in the reality how over and over they keep showing the symbol that's related to crossing over into another world. But before I do that, I'm just going to, again, have to clear my computer really briefly here. I'm having like a freeze up in the computer. Okay, so we're now forward again, and like I said, actually, I know that this conversation, and that's why I'm going to stay online until this gets translated completely today, because I know the information that is going to be coming across is so powerful that it must be translated properly. And the most incredible thing is I actually had a dream this morning that I wasn't going to be able to do this show, and it was a strange thing because it was so real that when I woke up, I was like, man, I'm glad that was just a dream, and now I'm glad that I have an opportunity to actually bring this message because I believe that it's so important to everything that we're dealing with here in the reality and understanding it. And it has a lot to do with what has been hidden. And we talked about before, like in the beginning of most of the work that we've been doing in the spiritual progress, we started to see that there was a lot of things hidden from us and that we didn't have access to. And sometimes we would get a hint of what it was. And of course, with the fear mind state, we would think, oh my goodness, who knows what's really back there? It could be the hive mind queen and from the Matrix, actually siphoning everyone's energy from them, and we're just batteries here in a world that has confined us into a construct of even a pentagram. And so as we begin to pull more and more data, of course, the fear way of thinking, which actually allows you to discover all this data, by the way, because in fear, you want to go and penetrate what makes you so fearful. And even if you look at the word horror, which is definitely attached to fear, you see hor, which we found is the word for horizontal, and then we find or, which is actually the word for gold. So basically what horror means is a horizontal gold line. And later on that'll make a lot more sense. But the reality is when you're talking about crossing over into other worlds, what generally keeps a person from doing such things is all of the things related to that have symbols of death around them. And the reason why it's like that is because, as they say, every night you die to especially the flesh, meaning that your body goes into a sleep or dead state, and then your spirit has this opportunity to go into this other world. And at that point, according to your biochemical program or the actual biochemical situation going on in your body, it determines whether you can actually access what then happens next and what levels of it that you can access, whether you could see it very clearly, but you can't move yourself, you're just watching yourself, or you can move yourself completely, or you can't even remember. So how much access you have to that world, which everyone is very curious about because they see it every night, or they know they go into a certain state that allows them access to something every night. That is what the connection, when the connection is complete between you and your oversoul, that's when that will clear up completely to where that world literally functions to a higher level than this one. Meaning that you can enjoy things and experience things there to a higher level than you can in this dense reality that is still has the limitation of the physical body. But what you can also begin to do is, as you begin to learn more in the higher vibratory fields, you bring back the essence of those higher vibratory fields into this reality. And how we can tell 100% that happens is that if you have a very negative dream, as it would be called, when you wake up, you don't feel so well. So your overall frequency is lower or hitting into a negative range. Now, this could have multiple uses, so it's not something to say, oh, I never want to have bad dreams again. But the reality is that we prefer the higher frequency to the lower frequency. We eventually have to learn how to deal with both and to have no separation between both. And that's what becomes the uniting of the right and left hemispheres of the brain. Now, the only way from my full discoveries now that this could happen is that because the body is full of these basically etheric crystal vehicles, that the only thing that they respond to is light. And if you notice, when you shine a light on some glass or a diamond or something of this nature, you get the whole frequency spectrum, the color spectrum. So this lets you know that when you shine, light affects crystals in every way. And how it came to our planet of how to develop the proper ability to alter the light language and even tap into our own selves and our own light vehicles to open up doors for more experiences is it came through language. But of course, language has a positive and a negative side to it. This is why we have curse words. You can say nice things to a person and you can say very mean things to a person. So the core of most languages carried the actual core words to the vibrations that correspond to the energies. So now that we use such expansive languages, the small words have lost their meaning entirely. And this is what has basically trapped us into the idea of Earth. And we'll get into that later. I even typed a note here that's called the idea of Earth, just so I know to talk to you about it later. But what happens is that as you begin to formulate what frequency that you're on, it goes, well, let me just explain it like this. We send a constant frequency out in our mind that I'm here on earth. I am, and then you give yourself the name. And then you keep going. There's a constant confirmation by the brain of where you are. It's called your anchor. If you didn't have this, then you couldn't even see earth. Whatever you had in your mind that became what you called your foundation or what you stand on, as right now we're standing on the ground, we're standing on earth. Or in my notes I say we found mother. We were standing on her. Now that's why everyone's looking for father and not being too concerned about what has been going on with mother, even though she always knows where father is because there's a connection there. So what we've confirmed where our foundation is, and so it sets an anchor point in the mind. And in so many words, you log in to then the program reality earth. Now, we uncovered a while ago that when you drop the Hebrew language down upon itself, it makes a Star of David, which is two intersecting triangles. The rest of the information that was conveyed definitely needs to be conveyed now, that triangles are the symbol of fire. So it's actually a fire language. And this also means that the pyramid, which means the fire inside, is literally a flaming pillar. And if you're in the astral realm, you could see that. And that's why the ancient Arabs had a saying that the pyramids could guide them through the desert. Not because they could visually see the pyramids from anywhere they were in the desert, but on the spiritual realm, they could always see where the anchor point was to get back into this system. So this is the knowledge that before we lost control of the ability to go into fourth dimension completely, this is the knowledge that pervades throughout the land, that everyone had access to this that world. And that's why there was very little wear and tear on this world, because if you could go into your own world or share multiple worlds with others on the other dimension, then they would be more than likely to entertain whatever it is that you were involved in. Now, here's the most important thing to realize, that getting into these other worlds didn't at times have anything to do with whether the person was positive or negative. Because the world belongs to them, only thing that was needed was the ability of being able to get in there. And then after that, the person could design the world how they would want it. And then when it was done, it would have a certain frequency. And if that frequency was not harmonic with higher frequencies or higher worlds, then those worlds would never touch them. So that world would never touch the higher world. So the idea is to construct a perfect world in your mind so that it actually begins to connect with the other worlds that are already in that state. And this again was passed to mankind through the languages, because what was given to them was what is known as the fire languages, which is Sanskrit, Tamil, Hebrew, and then these vertical, or what I'm just calling water languages, because the water falls and its steam goes up. So in that case, but because it falls sometimes in a straight line, I'm only giving the term now water languages, which were the ancient Oriental languages such as Kemetan or Egyptian and the Mandarin, which are written vertical. So going deeper into this, what we discovered already is that the language that the direction that the English language is in is controlling the direction of our mind, thus in times making us more right-handed or more solar. So what ends up happening is that when you have other beings that are on the same planet as you with codes in their mind, look at Chinese. It's one of the oldest languages. And then just look at it from a hypothetical standpoint, and you would think right away, I'm looking at an extraterrestrial language. What you're looking at is a linear language of exactly the symbol that it takes to make whatever it is being evoked by the symbol. So what happens is, again, when you have these people that are running on vertical languages, and then you have other people that are running on horizontal languages, this forms the symbol of the cross. And so, and many other things form the symbol of the cross. And this is why the cross becomes such a valuable symbol in our reality, because then when you lay another cross on it, and you connect all the lines on the outside, it becomes an octagon. So what happens is that, the cross itself just means a door. A double cross means a door in and a door out. So these are the kind of things that the ancients knew to pay attention to, because they were never trying to get stuck in one place. They were always masters at going and coming. That's why they were saying they were teaching humans how to cycle energy, how to cycle energy, not in how to leave or ascend into higher states. But of course, when that became externalized and people wanted to basically ascend into the world, then you would see then one component missing. And this is what we call the fractalization, or the divided, or the demon, the divided one. One part would be actually missing because in a physical reality, the frequency is as such. So if the higher frequency, which comes first, makes most of the decisions, does not want to enter into the low frequency or cannot enter the low frequency, then there becomes a separation. And this is exactly what's happened with humanity. We talked about it before. They've been Skyped or disconnected from their actual source, but mentally, because of course, if they were really disconnected from the actual source, they would not have life. There is not one energy here that is generated by one being only, meaning that this is an entirely collective reality where we're layered on top of each other through frequency. And when you lose the firmware of this program, meaning you've taken some mind-altering substance, you will notice that your surety of this environment being real starts to waver. So thus, the reality starts to waver. The ground starts to move because your mind is literally moving from its reality and belief that this is actually here. And then if you completely go into the other state of consciousness, which generally happens to many people who take mind-altering drugs, the ground disappears and another entire reality appears. This is because, again, the idea of Earth is embedded within us, and that idea is what keeps us anchored here. Now, the important part to see with all of this becomes, of course, first you want to learn how to do this in balance. You want to learn how to dematerialize and materialize. So the first thing that's necessary is for me to just explain to you very directly how this is not even hard to see can happen. That your frequency governs where you are and you have this ability to alter your frequency. But your ego ultimately controls the spin of where your power goes. And I'll elaborate on that just a little bit. What the ego does when you say a word of power, because you say words of power all the time. Like a lot of people ask, well, I even said the holy words. I even said mantras and nothing happened. Why? Because the ego spins the word based on what has been formulated with the ego. And now the ego is the term, I'm giving now the new term, which is called an undersoul. It's a very important term because many people talk about the oversoul, the oversoul, the oversoul. These are like the same unbalanced people because they don't know what the other component is that's needed to triangulate. Where is the oversoul? So when you're triangulating something, you must then create its opposite. So the oversoul has an undersoul. But then to get specific, because not to just invent words, what is this undersoul? It's wholly comprised of the ideas that you have gathered in conjunction with your oversoul through your experience, through this reality. And it begins to compact itself and form itself like basically a huge piece of clay. And then it becomes your job, because your job is now to learn to do what, quote unquote, God did or the creators did. But they're not going to let you loose on everyone else. They're going to let you loose on yourself. So you've created this mound of clay or dirt or rock, and you now have to mold it into perfection. So of course you could see how, because of course the karma, the dharma laws play into this. Multiple lives, a person is carrying their eidolon, their ego, their idea of them, their actual undersoul with them. And that's why, like I said before, the knowledge of how to shape, form, and fashion it and perfect it was actually the most important thing for those tuned in, because they never looked at the undersoul as a negative thing. What they actually looked at it is them being given the opportunity to form and fashion a world to their liking. But what ended up happening was people started creating things that they began to dislike, and then they got stuck in those things. So that's what the whole idea of falling asleep in your own dream is really about, meaning that you are forgetting and been made to forget, or you maybe made yourself forget, that you were the one in control of this entire reality. Now, the construct, let's talk about the construct and how this was put together, because, of course, there was a gap in the information. The information was lost. And the ideas of what I'm speaking of now were basically lost to humanity for a prolonged period of time before they start getting common sense again. So they say common sense is not common. So what you see is since you have these horizontal and vertical languages, if you possess the core of those languages within your system, meaning that because they're truth, once you know the core vibrations to things, then they cross in your body on their own. This, in turn, makes the vehicle activate. This then gives you access to a world that is already going on and been going on for a long time. Like I said, the reason why the Queen wears an 8-pointed star, the reason why individuals such as the Rastafarian line and Menelik and Haile Selassie wear these stars, and even though many of these people have been traced to not, from our standpoint, be doing good things for our reality on a whole, what we find is that all they're showing you is not necessarily that you have to go to their world unless you come indoctrinated by their program. What all they're showing is that they know about the other world. Now, there's a book that's called The Treasures of Russia. It was sponsored by the Bank of America. And people, you may want to hunt this book down, but what you'll find is a secret inside that book on a basque relief, which is like a mug carved in silver, and it has a picture of Solomon sitting on the throne, and he looks like a reptilian king. And it says on the bottom, an ode to Solomon and Sheba, love controlling time. That's exactly what it says. And I read this 4 or 5 years ago, and I was always puzzled about what exactly it means, and I came to my own conclusions at many different times. But now we'll roll right into the story about Solomon and Sheba and what this really means, this love controlling time. But in the Russian text already, meaning the Russian Orthodox, already know or are outside of time, running realities and things on their own. So let me explain to you what was going on. Now, Solomon, of course, means sun and moon. Sol is sun, Amon is M-O-O-N. So it's basically sun and moon, light and dark side, black and white. Whatever duality you want to put together, this is the being, and it's androgynous, and it's together. It's the deuce, as they call it. Humanity starts in this level. They have the spirit and their flesh. And then later on, they have to begin to govern how to make this triangulation or third partner. And who they choose to make that third partner with, or what they choose to make that third partner with, gets them to their next cycle. So remember, this is a sequence of choices that continuously triangulate themselves to put you in the next position. That's exactly how it works. So what happens with Solomon and Sheba, or the sun and moon was what they're calling the Adam Kadmon, the first being, the androgynous being, before it was split. Okay? And so the sun and moon needed to go to the queen of Sheba, who, as I talked about in the post, she's the queen of Sheba. Sheba means 7, so the queen of, or over the 7. So this makes her 8, or makes their retinue the number 8. So what happened here is that the androgynous being needed to meet this 8 in order to fully understand enlightenment. Because, of course, everything that comes after that, especially according to the Bible and even the Quran, with the interaction between Solomon and Sheba, then high levels of magic are gained. For better lack of words, high levels of mysticism are gained. And then Solomon gets the title of being the smartest or the wisest man on earth. But of course, we now can see that the wisest man would be androgynous. It would be the same as the wisest woman who's actually activated her other component. So now we get closer to the story. So the 7 wombs, the 7 planets, are the chakras. We know that we have different animals, plants, and things coming specifically out of some of these planetary centers. And what that actually allows us to divine or to figure out is that at least there's 7 major portals that life comes from. And then there was one over them all, that basically once you pass through the 7 portals, you had different planetary experiences. You had the experience as the mammal, the experience as the insect, the experience that keeps evolving you, But you cannot deny that it has happened because the composition of your body is made up of all of these things. So as you continue to go forward, actually I'm going to start just for a moment, I'm going to start a secondary recording here just to make sure that if we have some sound issues, that secondary recording can come up. Okay. All right, looks like everyone is tuned in the chat room, so let me go ahead and grab me an anchor point really quick here, and let me keep going. Okay, so what happens with this Solomon and Sheba story? Okay, I will tell you from here. Let me take a break for a moment. I just wanted to tell everyone, especially because we've gotten really close. Like, there's a lot of people on this line right now that we're really close because we text each other, we talk about different things, and we've developed something. And I want to tell you that I discovered something that is the complete finishing of the mysteries. Like, I think the one guy, he called it the cutting through. This means like the last pieces of it before now you know everything. I've now discovered all of that. And of course it's going to take a second to get it all out, and it's definitely not all going to come out in the show, but it's so core the truth that you'll find it everywhere. Then what you'll notice is that your frequency will of course change, it'll rise, but you'll remain in the same reality except for the environment will change. And even the individuals that start to come around you, they'll be totally different because the frequency has changed and all they're doing is matching up with harmonics. See, that's the key to this, is not to look for necessarily the external reaction behind all of these things, but to instead go deeper and look at the internal reaction. And let's talk about this internal. And we actually will begin at the beginning of my notes, which is the origin point. This is how you can 100% confirm that there is an oversoul, meaning that there is a grander form of you that projected yourself into the physical reality. And the reason why is that everything starts first from the idea or from the ether, from the thought or the thought. It comes from there first, and then it comes like a light beam because it's spoken in a language, even the language of thought. Nobody has thought about, well, what does it look like when an idea comes from our mind? Because it's there, so surely we can see it. But what does it look like? So that language that is of thought that's being used fires through cosmos like a beam, sending a projection of you. You basically spored, or a spore that dispersed all of your seeds into multiple plants or planets and realities to see how you would fare there. Basically to see if the harmonics in that reality was enough for you so that you can begin to grow. And this is what becomes the most important thing, because even if you die in one reality, what you'll find is you wake up in another. And this is very interesting. You see yourself at times die in dreams, but then you wake up. And this is because the only thing that you've done is you've projected yourself into another frequency, and that frequency may have been volatile for you, so thus you were terminated there. But you still wake up in the next frequency that you already have an anchor point on. So do you see how even in crossing over into these higher states of consciousness, again, are very symbolic to death, because you actually are experimenting with yourself. And that's why the world seems like a big experiment, is because many people are here experimenting with themselves, projecting themselves and learning certain things and eating and tasting certain things. What do you think that really is? It's an experiment that you're having on yourself to see if this flora and fauna is habitable for you. Now, of course, because there's a symbiotic relationship between us and collective planetary systems like this, the most that it will do all the time is try to keep you here, meaning that it will want to entertain you or allow you to remain on that the frequency that resides here. So, of course, once this kind of knowledge got into the hands of people who were attempting to manipulate the planet, then what they did was they said, well, we can on an overall level begin to embed in the minds of these advanced beings, these bio supercomputers, an idea of a world that we completely run. and they become basically slaves to us. So this is where the crossing of the knowledge that was obviously prevalent in Egypt fell into the wrong hands. They always have these cartoons and things, and they never let it fall into the wrong hands. But this knowledge of how to project, control, frequency lock, shape shift, and all these things fell into the hands of those who think of scarcity in fear. So it became a fear-based reality, an actual frequency of fear, where the child, not so much as the adult, but the child is embedded, especially from the TV, with multiple layers of fear of termination. So, and then this then locks up the person's energy. They bottleneck, for better lack of words, because they can't seem to project beyond this world, because they're told that nobody knows what goes on beyond this. So today we talk about what goes on beyond this and why there's already advanced beings there. This is because the languages, such as the fire language and the water languages, they were extraterrestrial languages. They already belonged to Oversoul beings that had graduated cycles like Earth a long time ago. So the only thing that was necessary was, again, for you to understand the core of the vibrations within those languages. And then at a certain point, when it clicked for you, you would then sync up with your Oversoul, which was also connected to everything. Basically like the same concept that we've already been talking about, that you are everything. This would literally allow that to happen because these languages, like I said, they program the crystal or the pineal gland with information that it needs in order to basically get onto the frequency that it's not on right now. So when it has these core words, it fits around it more or less like, I guess the term would be something of I would have to write down a term, but it's basically when the language itself begins to embed itself through symbols and streams of angles that actually become the chiseling to the crystal that is in your head. Because if you notice, like if you have a raw diamond, it's just a raw diamond. Like if you notice how it really looks just like a white piece of stone or sometimes just like a piece of ice. But then when it's chiseled and there's convexing and things that are made, then it starts to sparkle. So this is what the languages did. They took the raw stone and they chiseled and cut it, and then they made it into an actual geometry that would basically become a universal geometry. That there's a universal geometry that can be embedded into the pineal gland that allows it to mesh into all other realities, because it remains almost on top, or basically not even almost, but it remains on top of all other realities. And that's what I was saying in the post. There is a general rule about frequency. High frequencies can see, and especially if they want to, or even if they want to, other things on a lower frequency. But the ones on the lower frequency, it doesn't work the same, meaning they cannot always see what's on the higher frequency, because that's why they're in the lower frequency. So this is interesting how it works. You can turn it down, but at times it becomes a lot more harder to turn it up. As we said, it's harder to go up a hill than it is to go down a hill. So we still have an idea of what direction that we should go in, and that idea is the core of us. So I advise most people now to take this information that's coming across, to realize what I'm saying about these ancient languages. Of course, we're going to be developing and digging more into what exactly those core words are, how they match up with the other words in the reality, how they've been given dual meanings. This is the other thing. If we've noticed that many of the words, especially in the English language, have dual or triple meanings, sometimes multiple meanings, like bad means good now. Like, man, that's bad, man. I really like those. So the reality comes, what happens with the ego? When the ego does that, when it accepts bad as good, how can it ever get out of a reality that it's already logged into when it can't log back out with the codes anymore? And so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about restoring the codes. And when those codes are restored, you go into your Oversoul. Oversoul is is basically the highest state that can be reached because it's whole, it's complete. And then while you're on the dimension, you have access to your oversoul, so your energy systems are completely powered up. Then you can carry out what is already scheduled here for 2012. It appears that the reason why this information is actually being released across the thought stream is that this is it. And this actually works in our favor because sometimes people would say, well, are you saying that this is the last time? Well, we got a live line coming up here, and I'd like to call it that now instead of a deadline. But we have a live line that says, hey, this is it. You guys can really, really do this right now. You can actually activate, because if we give you till next year, and then a year after, and then a year after, it's just like anything else. It's like if the job says, hey, just come in anytime. What job do you have? It would just come in anytime. Don't even worry about it. There's a fixed system that keeps things in order so that you can experience the highest levels of yourself. You see? So sometimes we look at certain systems and certain paths as, okay, we need to forge a new path. And by all means, we'll definitely be clearing out a lot of shrubbery from a path that has not been traveled that often these days. But it is not a new path, meaning that those who have tread that path already are in the highest states of consciousness already. Their languages are so old that, of course, as we talked about before, if you had 300 or 400 more years of esoteric radio, we would be all on some other level of consciousness. So you have to give the quote-unquote the credit to the ancestral beings with the ancient extraterrestrial languages, because they had already figured out how to activate the light body. Then this knowledge gets lost because obviously whoever inserts themselves into the Old Testament, some say it was the Yalda Baal character, comes and divides and splits up and breaks the tower. What this really means is that there was a splitting of this knowledge and this language, and each person walked away with a piece of it. And as we said, and that's of course where the division comes in, because by divide and conquer. Once the division comes in, everyone splits up. Each person is carrying a piece of the DNA. It's not even just so much as the language, but each person is carrying a piece of the DNA. And so thus it sets it on a system where until we all came back together, then no one was going to get out. So no matter how much we scraped at the edges and we abused each other and we separated ourselves, it didn't matter. The whole system was on quarantine. And then certain individuals started figuring out that was going on. They started seeking and sending signals beyond the bubble, for better like words, like, why am I here? What am I supposed to do here? Just give me a meaning, give me a purpose, because I feel dead with no answers. And then those answers start to come when you send out that transmission and say, oh, okay, so you want to know now. You want to wake up now. So this is what's really going on, plant. This is what's really going on, seed. You have to become a tree. So still understand all the terminology being used here is so related to a garden. You can make everything like garden life. You reap what you sow. You have to watch where you throw your seeds, your currents. You have to make sure that you develop a connection with the plant, the soil. It needs to be mineralized. So these are all things that work on multiple levels, and it makes your body the book. You become the diagram to your own universe. And you know what becomes the most important thing on why that is necessary? Because you'll never get lost. You actually, anytime you can float out into the cosmos, but it doesn't matter. You're carrying the map. So eventually you'll come back with the complete design of who you are. And I'm just telling you now that it happened. It's the strangest thing, especially when you just come out of the sleep. But what you'll realize, like I said, is simple stuff like the horizontal and vertical languages. Once having both of those, they would cross-section each other. This would cause a crossing of the poles or a twining. This twining would then pump up the coil. And then once the coil was pumped up, the frequency would increase. And then once the frequency increased, I would actually sync up with higher frequencies. And once I did that, then I would be in realization of what exists there. And because they're on a higher frequency, they would have information and knowledge and essence and all sorts of things that were not available on the low frequencies. And then once I do that, you see, so this is like logic. And now you have to feel it. And that's why I've been adding more to the feeling side about what this interaction was, because now we'll continue with Solomon, and who's now mystically the Queen of Sheba, which we now know that, okay, first of all, they said the Queen of Sheba wasn't not exactly from that area, that somehow she was a Persian queen. And if you look deeper, because I've dug through a lot of these books, but she was a Persian queen, and she had been given charge over that area, and she had taken charge over that area and those people, and she bought her people, which were the Persians, the Indians, with her. And that's why the people in Ethiopia still they're the Dravidians. They are the original people that carried the knowledge and teachings of Dawood and Yaqub, which were more of all these words and languages came about a long time ago and had already lived themselves out. So, of course, later on, when even other people try to take credit for this, it resonates with people and they believe it because it is the truth that there was a major point where we actually, what I can say is this, is that once the Queen of Sheba or Cassia came from Persia into the area we call Ethiopia with the knowledge of the spirit, basically the origins of spirits, the wombs of the planet, the fire language, all this stuff, because remember, Christianity is the same as the religion of Zoroastrianism under Zarathustra. So it's the same thing, and they say, and in fact, it's just a couple name changes. In fact, that we would be worshiping that as far as the difference between Christianity and Zoroastrianism. We would be Zoroastrians if Xerxes did not send his entire fleet into Rome, and Rome, after already defeating them on land, and he got cocky and sent the entire fleet into Rome, and the Romans were the best at ships. Look what it says, row man. Row man, they row ships. Row means gold. They're ore. It's goldmen. So they went, maybe Goldman Sachs, they went into the sea with the masters of the sea. And that's why even now the Poseidon kingdoms and the Marines and Mary and the maritime laws and all that still hold because the sea forces were masters there. But the Persians or the fire people were masters on the land. Because remember, how often do you see water on top of fire? Okay? So on land, fire was ruler there. So the Persian armies had no problem with the Roman soldiers on land, but when they got on the sea, fire doesn't work really well on water. And how you see this story play out today in your movie? Avatar. Avatar is 100% the movie. The fire people are coming. The ice people must defend them. Both of these are too extreme. The ice people must defend the world from the fire people. This is none other than the same propaganda of the United States and Iraq and Iran. And then both of them are polarized. One is the ice queen, Isis, and the other one is the fire god, whatever you want to call him, Al-Hazred, whatever name they're going to give him, because they have multiple names of flame. So you have these two sides, and then both of them are completely polarized. So in the middle is you. Sometimes don't you feel like you're in the middle of someone else's stuff? So that's what this is really about. You're the steam. But the steam is the development. See, why these energies that are polarized are actually doing you a huge benefit. They're allowing you to actually see what happens if you get completely polarized and the conflicts that go on, and then you become either compassionate or callous. Meaning you either get the compass to Zion or you become a formulation on the bottom of a foot. So, or a dense thing that stuck to something that, you're being treaded upon. So these are all the same words. So what happens here is that it's a happy day for us. It's a happy existence for us now. We're closing the door on a lot of the old states of consciousness. Like, people email me all the time, and there's some different factions, and some have been following the work for a while, and they say, well, where is the against Lucifer propaganda? Show me that. This is the email I got the other day. Show me the information that is against Lucifer, because it sounds like you may be sympathizing. And I don't know. I just ban the person. I don't have time. See, people have to understand, I'm not playing with you. I'm not here to play games. But the reality is that been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Nobody did Destroy Lucifer episodes. We did a Destroy Lucifer episode. But once it's done, it's done. That's what happens when you're confirmed. Meaning that people who feel like they must do the same thing over and over again mean that it's not getting done somehow. When I do things, and when we do things now, we do to finish it. Because the last thing, if there is any fear I have left, it's wasting time. I hate to waste time. So I hate to also waste anyone else's time. So this is how my hates and things of that nature can actually be used to power me. Meaning, hate to eat a cheeseburger. You see what I mean? This is how the entire construct can be basically formed and fashioned in your favor. And it can happen a lot faster for you the more that you begin to actually expand into the core meaning of things that I'm explaining today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to probably take some calls. And today's show is only an hour. Like last show, we got a lot done, and I want to say definitely thank you to my panel. We said a lot, and there was a lot of time left, so we kind of danced around things. But I really feel like most of what needs to be translated to people can be done within an hour, and then they can use the rest of their day to actually expand that. Because that's what I'm doing. I'm giving you compressed knowledge that will expand in your mind, because it's absolutely 100% the truth. And so what I'm asking all callers to do, there's quite a few people that have called in. If you want to ask a question, just simply press 1. Also, if you're just in the chat box, you can ask the question there and I can answer it. And this becomes the best time to do it because I actually have access to such a high level of information and energy about exactly how to develop yourself, change your frequency, sync up with your oversoul right in the time that you're actually needed most. Because realistically right now, a lot of people are asking, well, what is really going to happen in the future? And of course, I'm an optimist because I've already crossed into death before. I mean, I know that there's no such thing. So what this leaves for me is to also have to explain that to everyone else. And so I want to get the information translated to you today about how to neutralize fears and how to understand symbolism. Because instead of us throwing all the symbolism out the window, it's the Illuminati. Well, first of all, no real illuminist is here. So the ones that are saying that they're Illuminati are actually what the real illuminists use to cover their trail. Because they do the same thing. They cover the trail behind themselves. They don't let you see the door. Right? Look at the entire reality. You don't even have access to your third eye, which shows you where everything really is. So this means they're covering the door. So any person that is crossing into other worlds has been, especially under the Piscean era, covering their tracks so no one can see that they're doing that. So from that tense, what makes you think that the individuals that are calling themselves the Illuminati right now are the real Illuminati? No, they're the ones allowed to control and cover the tracks. Why? Because this is just a part of what you have to penetrate to get the truth. Meaning that all the knowledge about Shiva, the temple building, the geometries, the fire languages, we had to wipe the slate clean of that. Because who was interpreting it was interpreting on the same external level that they've been interpreting the Christ or the Kundalini, rising it to the place of Golgotha or the place of the skulls. I take this down and I bring it back up. You can do these type of things. You can do these same kind of things, but even greater. These type of terms Krishna was even more, the works of Krishna were even more of a what I would call an embroidered language. So meaning that what was being said by the individuals that copied the teaching wasn't even said to the perfection that it had already been presented. 1. 2, we now know that the individuals that are parading around as Muhammad's and parading around as Jesus's are none other. They say Muhammad, the one that everyone is now linking the bloodlines to was Muslim, which was the individual who saw the real Muhammad, as Dr. Malachi York revealed from the teachings of Sudan. He saw the real Muhammad and saw how much attraction people had to him and desired to use him for his political agenda. And of course, the real Muhammad, who wrote the numerically equivalent Quran to the number 19, which the individual Rashad Khalifa was killed in Las Vegas before passing it to his sect, which those books are still floating around somewhere, but it's numerically equivalent to the number 19, and that was known to be the miracle of Muhammad because no one can do that. Even a supercomputer can't do it. Keep an actual real story running while the words are perfectly equating to the number 19 every sentence, even to the end of the book. So that's why I said Muhammad's only miracle was his book, but it's not the one that's in circulation right now because he never mentioned his own name. Because once if he put his own name into the book, it would throw the whole book off of the numerical equivalency. And he ran, or his daughter Fatima, with the hand of Fatima, meaning the power of the pentagram, went and backed off the caliphs and went to Sudan, where the oldest cult of such teaching, known as the Tsar cult, still remains. So this is the knowledge that they put away. And then Musaylima comes forth. He brings forth his own version of Muhammad. How many can you really find over there? And look for Muhammad in Baghdad right now and see how many there will really be. And this is how it kept going. Same thing with the story of Jesus. That's why there's no documents showing Jesus' movement except for the plagiarized documents of Josephus from him being bribed by the Vatican. So the reality is that it wasn't Jesus by that name. They took that name later on because it's an ineffable name. But it was Apollonius of Tyana, who has a very recorded record of first going into India, then coming back with those teachings to the Greeks, and then them believing him to be the only God because he was the first one to come to them with this kind of power. And of course, because his name was Apollonius, which to them meant Apollo or the sun god, they thus deified Apollonius as their new sun god. And then because the Greeks were looked at as the most cultured by the Romans, who had really just got on the planet from their dog god, but because they were looked at as the ones with the culture, they adapted the Apollonian tradition under the name Adonai, and then ran with it, and then brought you today what is Christianity under the symbol of an individual that is genderized, race specified, as I say, and all of these things in order to actually separate you. Because, again, Christus Kundalini. So this crisis that's running around is the Antichrist. And that's why I said before, you have to have a Christ before you have an Antichrist. So that's what people are dealing with. So in this world of spirituality and in these other realities that we're synced into now because of our frequency, I wouldn't look at it as a game if you are trying to get control over it again. If you have control over it already, it's 100% a game. Like, if you have control over the reality, it's fun as a game. But when you don't have any control of it, it actually is a prison. So people have to learn which one they want now, and they have approximately 11 more months to figure that out. What happens is you have to activate the light inside. That's why shaman, and I'll type in here in the chat box, shaman is really she-man. What is a she-man? A she-man is an androgynon. See, the words themselves just mean androgynous. So many people, of course, have taken this literal and external, and they've externalized their sexuality into the environment as whatever their sexual preference is. But the real shaman or she-man has both of these energies activated inside of them. And this allows this cycling of energy. So you see, all words of power that have ever been given to humans means the connection of their masculine and feminine sides. These two energies, once connected, activate them. So let's see if we have any calls. We have one call. We have about 4 more minutes left in the actual time of this, and of course we may go over just a little bit, but we're just going to go ahead and take that call from area code 469. But first, I'm going to have to put on some headphones here so that we don't get a reverb. Like I said, I just encourage people to ask questions about anything. If you want to know how to program your reality, if you want to know about, anything, you can get an answer now. Okay, caller from the area code 469. You're on Esoteric Radio. Wholeness.
Hey, greetings, Sevan. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you.
Yes. This is Adele from Texas. And you have hit just on the last of my question that I was going to ask. And that is, once you have come strongly aware of the connection of your female and your male energies, when they come together and become as one. I want to ask the question, what is the one? Once that feminine and the masculine energy comes together and it becomes one, what is the one called? And the other part of that, and the other part of that question is, if I'm down here on this plane and I am projected from another dimension, so to speak, can I become my own twin soul flame?
Well, I mean, that's what's happening. That's what's happening anyway. But I'm going to let you ask the second question again. That way, that I can just focus on the first question. And so the first question is, what is that one when we unite the masculine and the feminine? And for the person who has done that already. Now, first of all, let's just talk about doing that already. Because a lot of times we sometimes forfeit or count ourselves out of receiving something by saying that we've received it already. This is, again, what I was saying about the spin of the ego. It actually cancels a lot of things out that can happen for us. What I discovered now here is that because you have this fire language and you have this water language, there are words that are basically some of the same words that are used to intone chakras. But once you can get just those core words, and I'll definitely be working on this night and day, but once you can get those core words just in your mind, then what happens is that between this fire language and this water language, it really does connect. There really becomes a masculine and feminine connection within your body, and this starts to make you feel it does it on its own. It does it into the DNA. Once you get this light code, for better lack of words, it starts the process as soon as it begins to be embedded in your mind by you. So what this one is actually not a one. It's a symbol that looks like a 0 and a 1. And this symbol itself means completion. It's also what we pull apart as the number 10, but they're supposed to be together. They're not supposed to be apart. So this is kind of how the trickery goes on within the symbol. So this symbol, which is just a circle with a straight line through it, is the symbol that you're talking about when unity has taken place.
You're getting bad feedback.
Okay, hold on real quick for me because the show is actually... The show is actually it's going through its closing period. So if you can just hold on for a quick second, because there was only 3 seconds on the clock, and then we'll get right back into it. So let's just hold for a quick second so it can clear itself. Okay. These are. Okay, we got 10 seconds remaining, so let's they're off. That's the longest 10 seconds. So it's a symbol. So if you were looking for...
I'd have to call back in because it sounds like you're talking underwater.
Okay, yeah, that may be actually... Are you calling through Skype?
No, not at all.
Okay, so maybe you might have the clear line. I'm going to ask someone else in the chat room. Is everyone hearing me clearly at this point? And I'm sure someone will text back here in a moment. Okay, I'm asking again in the chat box, is everyone hearing the line clearly? If someone can just type back and say, yeah, they're hearing clearly, and then we can have the sister just call back, and that'll just confirm for us that it's possibly a connection with the line. Let's see here. Okay, I'm not sure if anyone can even hear because they're not actually responding back, so I'm not even sure if they're actually hearing me okay in the chat box. So, sister, why don't you just go ahead and call me back, and I'll see your 469 area code. So I'll take the call again, and then we'll just give it another try. How about that? Because, let's just try that. Okay, caller from the 813 area code. You're on Esoteric Radio, and can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you good.
Okay, great. Great.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing excellent.
All right. I had a question about the cassia. Where would you get a hold of that, and is it necessary to always try ayahuasca before?
Well, I mean, I guess you would have to really talk to the inner self to see what it's more saying, but the difference between the two is, of course, like the ayahuasca is a step up the ladder, and then the DMT is like, I don't know, a space elevator. So that's the difference. And at times, it takes to do that stepping up the ladder, especially if you need to cleanse. So let's talk about that. Basically, what the ayahuasca also does is it removes a lot of toxins and things that are hidden within the body, and that also removes them in the psyche simultaneously. So it'll actually show you at times the images of when certain things have happened, and then it allows you the opportunity to forgive that, for better lack of words, and then you seem to purge it at the same time. Sometimes it even comes out in the toilet. So this is like a straight shot into cleansing the body. Okay, so the other thing is that I can also answer I'm sorry, I was attempting to answer the latest question. I see her talking in the chat box. Okay, so does that make sense for you? So the DMT, now let's talk about, how to get a hold of it, or cassia. Now, to finish the story, so the Queen Cassia, which I'll be putting this post together, so it'll have all this information in there, but the Queen Cassiopeia was the actual ability or knowledge that was given the cassia plant, or access to the tree in the middle of the garden, which they knew to be in Ethiopia because they have 4 rivers running underneath the ground. So that tree gave those who ate from that tree the ability to see, meaning the ability to have a third eye activation, and at least, even if they had it for a moment, then you don't really act anymore like there's not another world that exists, especially if you were probably over on their land. Because when you have these kind of experiences, it's highly selective to what area that you're actually in. You generally want to surround yourself by as much organic life as possible, because there are a lot of things running around the city. We'll just put it like that. Like, you don't want to leave yourself open to energies that are volatile. You always want to practice astral hygiene anytime you're ready to have a experience of an altered state of consciousness, or even in meditation. This is taking certain herbs like spearmint and these kind of things that push out negative energies anyway. Sage, these kind of things, and get a nice mixture together for yourself. So what happens from here is that, of course, because this is a substance that's not exactly legal, what you have available to you is you have the cassia bark, which is legal. And then from that, like I said, it must be taken through an alchemical process and before it formulates something of the substance that does take you into this higher state of consciousness right away. So remember, obviously the knowledge of that also had to be translated. Like when Solomon, or the androgynous man, went into Sheba, or the place of seven, or the womb, the knowledge wasn't just to find the tree. It was also how to take the tree through the proper process. So I guess in essence what you're looking at with the cassia is in certain ways the externalized version of something that needs to happen internally. The only situation that we're dealing with now on Earth is our air alone is enough to throw us off of the frequency. Like the air that we take in that comes right out of the back of these cars is what affects at times us being able to get onto a higher frequency. And that's why people that live in higher places or higher elevations, such as the Himalayas, I think it's 20,000, something really high feet in the air, then the air is completely different. So that air would be like you were on cassia all the time as a meditator. You see what I mean? So in certain senses, as humanity has always trudged its way through of figuring out things, that the cassia became the ability to fix the situation that was going on with your crown chakra, especially with the calcification that is now something new. The calcification was not something that the ancient people had an issue with. Their water did not contain heavy deposits and sediments of chemicals. So the reality is that we are having to make our way out of this triangulation that we've created. So you can access the bark. As I said, we're running an experiment. You can access the bark online, but we're running an experiment the moment that we can get a hold of some more of the bark to see if when steeped, which means just basically taken through a basic boiling process, or a process where boiling water extracts what is in it, can it be applied as a tea, and then it starts to give gradual effects of what the alchemically transmuted substance would actually do. So that's where we're at with the whole thing. But I personally would recommend for a person, especially if they know they have some things they need to iron out, especially with duality. They don't really see, if you don't see how positive and negative are really the same thing, and if not more that negativity is an illusion, but you're still in conflict with all sorts of things, even though you don't really come in contact with those things any time of the day. You more come in contact with the ripple, what you believe is the ripple effect of those things. Then you need definitely to work on detoxifying yourself first. Because what will happen is when in many cases, I can't say in all cases, but in certain cases with the cassia, is for an advanced spiritual person, first time going in, they'll have like a duality experience. Because if they still haven't left the dual plane, then what will come forth is generally something badder than them, for better lack of words, if they're still dealing with the ego thing. However, for people who have, just giving, I guess, some details here, but for people who have like a generally a peaceable, non-dualistic way, then they have the best experiences with the cassia right away, not even going into the ayahuascas first. And so this again, it makes a big difference where your intellect is, your frequencies, your intention. These kind of things make a big difference.
Oh, okay. Am I still on line?
Yep.
Oh, all right. I wanted to say thank you also for all your help and, just sticking around.
Oh, man. I mean,
I appreciate everything.
It's a pleasure. I mean, it's definitely good to be involved in something. That's really what we're all looking for. That's kind of what gives us life, is to have purpose. Like, that's really what this boils down to. The earth itself only becomes real for us when we make it real. And it has no limits to it. The limit is our intelligence. The limits are our religions. That's the real deal here. And whatever it takes to show a person that's what we're really doing. We're going multiple ways of showing people, look, come out. Like, there's nothing here that is going to hurt you. Once you change your frequency, you immediately are not susceptible to what goes on with the lower frequencies, but you have to make a frequency switch. And then you can work with the lower frequencies from there, meaning that I had this conversation the other day. It was very funny. But we were talking about the shaman again, and we were talking about how the shaman goes into the lower world. And there were some other people observing the conversation, and they said, what? Why would anyone ever want to go into the lower world? Like, we're only trying to ascend. And this is, once again, that thing I was telling you people about of setting themselves up as a giver and a receiver in balance rather than just a receiver. What happens is that the shaman knows that there are multiple beings on the lower planes that are lost. They're no different than humans that have died that never knew the truth. So they become a light for them and guide them out of that darkness so that they can find another portal to reincarnate in and give it another shot. So that's an awesome gesture to humanity. That goes way beyond what most people are willing to do for another person. But see, these people had already locked into a long time ago, the more that you do for others, the more it guaranteed you were going to have in your continuous existence more things to connect to, more things that actually had you in favor, so that way you would never end up in that same position. It's almost like it's very difficult for you to end up in the same position that you help people out of. So if you help people out of ignorance, it's very difficult for you to fall into ignorance. And this is what we were also saying about making a certain part of your life involved in spirituality and developing spirituality with others, because it makes your lifestyle actually tied to something that no matter what, you get enlightenment at a certain point in the day, or at least at a certain point in the week, and making it more part of the fluid that runs through you. So, but we're going to get into in the next show, of course it'll be a 2012 show, we'll have the panel on. We're going to be getting into these light languages, and we're going to be getting into some of this planetary knowledge and exactly how we can see the energies based on the numbers and the geometry for what they really are. And that's why we've had to kind of start over with all of what has been presented to us, because, as I said, the representation that has been given for many of the symbols and then their definition. For instance, the word guru means Jupiter. Most people that are practicing in the Western culture just believe that means the teacher inside. Now, Jupiter's real name is Zedek, which means priest, as in the term Melchizedek means priest king. So Zedek just means the priest. So in essence, it does mean the priest inside, but if you happen to externalize it, then you get the same energy that is basically running through the church. And so that's why many of the guru situations that are going on right now, especially when they're using that term, chanting that term, etc., is more like this person's just in church worshiping again. And so that's what I mean by understanding when something is being externalized and then how to internalize it again to get its true meaning. So, brother, hopefully that's the questions are complete that you need to that you needed to ask. Is that everything?
Well, yes, unless, I'm not sure if there's anyone else have a question or, I was going to ask another thing.
Okay, well, if you want to stay on the line, then I can definitely come back or forward, as I say, to you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the lady that actually called in first that had those questions and was accidentally disconnected.
Okay.
So I'm going to open that line. But if you stay online, then I can definitely get to your question. That's what I'm here for. So I'm going to go ahead and open the line back up on area code 469. Sister, are you still there? Can you now hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly. I've heard all the conversation that was going on so perfect. And I did understand what you were saying. So I think I just need some work done on my with that. What you said has really helped me a lot.
Well, it definitely is going to help a lot more here because for those that don't know yet, we did get an application for the Android, which is the actual cellular phone for those that do still carry cellular phones, and we're going to have another one for the iPhone. And what it allows us to do is it just allows us to translate this information right away. So that means that the moment that the proper frequencies, tones, vibrations, and things are produced with all the proof, by the way, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to produce any of this stuff like, hey, here's the word and just use this word. I'm going to produce all the proof of what it does. But that can get right to you, and then you can have that with you at all times, and you can even give it or send it to others. And this allows us to just kind of cut down a lot of the time that's associated with, just transferring things to people. But I can see now that definitely 100% that either, as it was presented, that either we learn a new language or we figure out what was going on with the ancient languages. And those are our choices. So in this essence, it'd probably be a lot better, since there's nothing new under the sun, for us to figure out the core of the ancient languages, put that back together, figure out how it crosses over in English, then bring the real meaning of the term, the real sound of the vibration, then match it with the proper shape, and then color, and then we have the blueprint, or what they call a template, to the real activation of the light body vehicle in connection with the Oversoul. And so that's what we're talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and take the next caller, as long as you had nothing else to bring forward. Sister, and I do want to thank you for calling in and asking those questions. Did I answer also your last question? I think we also kind of got to in a roundabout way. Is that correct?
Yeah. You know what, Sevan? When you have right in the center of your forehead, when you have feel like a contraction, like when you, it's not like somebody's touching in it, but it feels it's moving on the, what is that?
Yeah, that's called pineal gland breathing. I actually, that the pineal gland swells and contracts and swells and contracts. And there's other glands, like Crystal talks about. She says, we talk about the pineal gland, but we never talk about the pituitary gland. There's a few glands in there. And that's why for some people it's clear that they're using something that is more in their forehead, while other people it's clear that they're using something that is in between their eye. And when you look at the diagrams, you see that with these particular glands, that they have these tentacles that come forward in both of these areas. So it also depends on which one you have activated to where you feel that sensation at. But that sensation is definitely the swelling and contracting, because these organs also breathe.
So what do you do when that happens? What is it? Something I'm supposed to be doing, or
well, Well, sometimes you want to definitely allow it to intensify because it's expanding, and it, of course, needs to expand. And you can do this by placing a crystal, like an amethyst crystal and a quartz crystal in conjunction in that area if you happen to be laying down. You can also do the dorsal breathing, which is just the intention of thinking that when you're breathing, that is going right up into that area, and it actually does take air into that area. So it allows it to basically begin to develop. You could see it as you beginning to perform CPR on something else, something that is trying to come back alive. You see?
Right. Okay.
This is how that will work. So I also wanted to say no problem. It's definitely my pleasure, and I'm going to go ahead and mute the line. I also wanted to tell everyone that these vibrations of these languages have the ability to regenerate cells. That's what the main thing that was tapped into is, because it allows cells to be regenerated. So for those that may be experiencing somewhat of a deadened spiritual existence, meaning that even things that work for everyone else, they can't feel at all, this is basically like a spiritual cancer. So the regeneration through the vibration of the language helps, and not just helps, but replenishes and cures those problems, because remember, it connects with beings that already advanced themselves beyond duality. Now, the dualistic beings that we're dealing with here should not be confused because they're externalized. That's why when we even talk about these organizations and then their Molochs and their Baphomets, they are externalizing those energies into this reality, and we're seeing how those energies act themselves out through them. But they're acting out in the reality. What you'll actually see for when you get into this higher level of knowledge is that the only thing you really want to control is your own reality, the environment that you are submerged in, not in everyone else's. It's, you have enough to do in your own world. And so what literally happens is if you see someone else acting out with the knowledge and the power into the reality to benefit themselves and caging people in and all this kind of stuff, this means that the knowledge that they actually have access to is not really strong knowledge. The only thing that's keeping them going is the program that's actually in the reality itself that says we have to listen and deal with that. And the reason is because humanity has not had an alternative to what it believes is God. And that's why, as another gentleman I was listening to his recording, he mentioned God can now be your cat. God can now be the Queen of England. God, the meaning of what God is has completely been lost. And this is because people can't feel it. And the reason why they can't feel it is because they don't know the name. And when they do know the name, then they can't sync up with the vibration unless they come out of duality, because all those energies don't exist in duality. And if for some reason you have bought something that you believe is God into your world and it's still dual, it's going to polarize you and then make you act out, or you're going to make yourself basically act out in a polarized way. And so this is what we witness with the religion. So we're going to go ahead and take the area code 786. Caller, you're on the Esoteric Radio. We do have a little bit of time left. We just asked that we have a couple more callers in that you ask your question, if you can.
Yes, my question is about the dreams. Like during the time of day, does that matter of how can you control your dreams between the time of day? Because people in America sleep at a certain time than somebody like Africa. So does that?
Right. I mean, you're always going to have more of a success in. I can tell you 100% way to really start getting in there. What you do is, first of all, in the morning, because all the frequencies are the lowest. By midday, everything's turned on. You got electrical stuff flying around everywhere. And remember, this electrical grid, super grid, is affecting how far and what you see and et cetera in this whole astral experience. So early in the morning, what you want to do is you want to set the alarm for 4:45, something of this nature. So it's right before the sun rises. Then when it goes off, you want to actually get up and then shake yourself off a little bit, but not enough to wake yourself up completely. Maybe go use the restroom, and then go back to bed and cover up your eyes. And then, of course, you'll probably have to get back up because you maybe go to work or something like this, so you have to get back up. But in that space, because you won't really be sleep, you won't enter into theta, you'll have much more access to your dream. Now, again, the biochemical level of your body, meaning what's actually in your body, is going to affect a lot of what you see then. So maybe you might want to throw some Ethereum black on the side of the bed or something of this nature and just have everything readily accessible, because you don't want to come so high out of frequency that you're basically awake. And this will allow you when the sun starts to come up, because there's, again, some type of huge frequency stabilization that happens at that moment, then you have more access versus in the middle of the day, you may fall asleep in the back of a car and then all of a sudden start having a weird dream. But if you're looking to get into that dream and really see what's going on and maybe even control it, you're going to definitely need to work with those early hours in the morning.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead to the next caller, area code 856. Caller, you're on the air with Esoteric Radio.
Hello.
Good day.
Hello?
Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing exceptionally well, thank you.
Nice to talk to you, Sevan. This is my first time calling in.
Okay, congratulations. It's good that you made that attempt, and we're definitely here for you.
Cool. Well, I've been having bouts of bad energy within my girlfriend's family, and I believe she mentioned to me one time that her family is actually cursed. And every day it's always some bad fortune. And I was wondering what I can do as like an insider, but like an outsider watching these bad fortunes happen to the family.
Okay, I'll address the question directly. Now, this is again what I'm talking about, like 2012, like it's upping the ante, for better lack of words. Like there are a lot of people that do know and understand that there's negative energies running around here unchecked, and that there are curses and all sorts of things, or at least the belief of curses. Let's just say that. There's the belief of curses and things of that nature, so there's kind of a binding and a weaving nature that's taking place in the reality where it seems like other people are holding back others. In fact, this is going on almost like the worldwide situation where there's one person that's trying to get free, but multiple people actually holding them down, or different things happening that pulls them back into the same old frequency, like getting calls from the parents or the siblings and that of bad news, and then it's very hard to remain optimistic. So it's almost like their negative energy begins to rub off on you, even if you get free. What do you do? Okay, now that's exactly why we're now introducing this next technique. Because this next technique, it gives you the ability to do something if you choose to. This is what happens. Now, the reason why I say if you choose to is because once you come into the higher frequency harmonic, because remember, there's already a collective group. It's not even a group. It's really like the universe. It's already all there. So then you'll begin to see other things, and they'll show you very clearly. And then sometimes you may not move on the behalf, even though you have the ability to, of those individuals, because you've seen other things. And then you'll actually instruct in another way, basically allowing them to know. You'll direct them to what's going on. Maybe you'll direct them to the knowledge and how to free themselves. But that becomes that's how you do the Avenger, meaning that you give the knowledge that will free them. As they say, you don't teach a person you don't just keep feeding a person, you teach them how to cook. That's what they say. So that way, when they're alone, they can do it by themselves. So this is the same thing. Like, you don't want to ride in full golden armor and blast all the demons away from them. You want to give them the ability to do that on their own. But in order to even move in like that, then you have to have that knowledge, and you have to have that kind of aura about you that pushes back those that are in doubt. Now, who's in doubt? The ones that are in ignorance. Their color has a tendency to be a foggy type gray, enveloping cold darkness. So when you come in with the light, meaning the light's already inside, then it pushes for a moment that vague, that haze off of the person. And I'll tell you the truth, like, I've been practicing and studying and experimenting and all of that with spirituality since a child, but I've only seen very few things that work and that connect with higher energies. And I've now got to the point where I'm able to identify where those energies come from and how they exactly work, meaning the inner workings. And what I can say to you now is that it's 100% the language. Like, if you don't have a connection with yourself, basically, your oversoul, the ancient one, etc., if you don't have a connection with that, then there's really, all of what you're seeing is not even the real thing yet. And so that's why we work really more on the understanding first, where a person starts to get themselves developed. And then they go back into the trenches and start working with their mother, their father, sister, brother, different individuals, different situations, because they know what to do in there. But now, like I said, this is the first time. Like I scour the internet every day, and people do it also inside of our faction for the information to get us into the higher states of consciousness without any binding effect. And so thus it's taken us all the way up until this point now to figure out what seems to almost be logical. So it's almost meaning that it seems to be common sense that if you have a horizontal and a vertical language and you learn both, this would make a cross-section within your body which would activate you. So that seems like it would be common sense when you're awake, but when you're asleep, none of that kind of makes sense. So this is really what we have to do. We have to give ourselves this opportunity to learn this knowledge that would generally take a person 20 or 30 years, because you would end up having to learn the whole language. Now we can take the core of the language, which doesn't require you to learn the language, just to have the core of it. And then you can come with those vibrations which awake your worlds and change the frequency and the harmonics of your organs to the ones that they're supposed to be in. Thus, like I said, it's a huge synchronization with you and your oversoul so you can move on the behalf of the universe. So at this point, you will stop even seeing your spouse's family as the only one having issues, but actually the entire planet. And you will move on the planetary behalf, and you will see it basically cause a ripple effect that will enter into their lives also. So it's almost like another way of going at it. So that's the advice I can definitely give you now. And also, just as something that can be done now, because of course we're still developing a lot of this information and tracking down the specifics on the vibrations, etc. But what you can do now is that crown chakra pattern, it emits 528 hertz, a frequency of, they say it's frequency of love. I could call it the frequency of compassion. But really what it is the frequency of the third eye. And because the frequency of the third eye is higher than the frequency of the lower worlds or the lower chakras, I believe even having that image around actually brings up the overall energy in the environment. And some people say, well, wait a minute, are you saying to carry sigils around? What I'm telling you is that if you have dookie on the floor, it stinks. And then flies get on it because it's a certain frequency. So if you carry certain things that have a higher frequency automatically associated with them because they already established that. And that's what became like the big art of having idols and Buddha statues and all that things around, even though now it's gotten really confused. But it was just a simple knowledge that especially brass and bronze holds the frequency of all the individuals that have ever been around it. So anytime you have like one of those large bronze statues inside of a temple, all the people who've ever meditated, energy is still vibrating off of that. Because that's why I said it's human or humming. We hum, we make this sound, and the sound is everything for us. And sure enough, it really is. Our entire reality is just constructed of sound. Sound waves from light waves coming into sound and then manifesting into mass. And so that's how we also understand where our origin point is. So hopefully that gives you enough information. Of course, that crown chakra pattern is available on the Resistance site. And I've already, because I was able to test it from different levels, which is why I can authenticate it. First, I have to authenticate if that's really the pattern. And the only way you can authenticate whether that's the crown chakra pattern is to have an open crown chakra. But in the instance where my crown chakra opened and my third eye also, I was able to see the exact same cornucopic field. In addition to that, I was traveling through Sai Baba's site, and he has a very extensive area in chakras, and I found that whoever works for him that was doing the patterns also included just a slight variation, just to where the convex triangles are positioned, but the exact same pattern of the crown chakra. So then we log it one more time. And then finally, our final confirmation is the Chladni plate, which is when the Chladni plate plays 102 or 528 hertz, the pattern pops up again. So we have an actual match. And so that's how we can authenticate what symbols and things that we're using. Now, of course, you don't see a talisman appear on the cymatic plate. So that means that the talisman is still under the influence of external beings. When you're using cymatics, this is like you're on another level. You're using the universal frequency code. Nothing can mess with that. And so that's where this next level of knowledge the Resistance is going to be presenting through neo-universalism, is that we can trump all symbols anyway because we're non-external. And so it's not something that we actually even have to prove. It's something that just will happen. And that's why I rather deal with that kind of stuff. And so hopefully that answers your question. We got a couple more questions, but does that get you taken care of, brother?
Pretty much. I appreciate your time, man.
Okay, no problem. So we're going to go ahead into caller area code 205. You're on Esoteric Radio. Actually, Holden, how are you doing?
Doing wonderful. How you been doing?
Oh, man, excellent.
That's good. I got two quick questions.
Okay.
I was seeing I've been aiming, you know what I'm saying, for purification and doing a lot of meditating and, you know, coming to Buddhahood and just learning, you know, getting to the language, you know, just trying to learn the different language, you know. I see a big difference in it. But my question was, what mineral in this time period right now that'll be good for purification?
Very good question. There's actually, of course, it depends on what kind of purification that you're going through. Like, I think that personally herbs, because remember, herbs in the mineral kingdom is one thing, but then, you know, the herbal kingdom tends to work more with the physical body. So what happens is at times is that you have to approach it from the dense part of your being first. And so what I would say the minerals that would 100% play more in this time to actually the awakening would be the herbs. Working with the Gutta-Cola, working with the oreganos, the parsleys, working with, and these are things that are in your store, working with the curries and the turmerics, because these allow you to be insulated, because you're still dealing with energy. Like everyone is going through their own path. So once they fully activate with the Oversoul, the question is, can they hold the energy? Like that, and is the body tuned up enough to actually hold the energy? And they say that certain people, it'll be a lot easier for than others because of their genetics, etc. But overall, it becomes how you treat your body. And that's why with the Ayurveda, they have even spec'd for your birthday what your diet is supposed to be like. They know if you're a fiery person. They know if they call it your dosha. So this is things that need to be really looked into, because that's how the teachings were really put together in the past that were complete, which will work with the mind, body, and the soul. And so those elements, such as the Shilajit and the Jing Builders and the Chulin, those elements actually allow the physical body to go through the metamorphosis that will allow its current for it to conduct and carry that current. Because you got to remember that the body is electric, so even thought, or what they call synapses, how fast your current is moving, it has a lot to do with the elements that are in your body and, of course, the alkaline levels. So I would say that these are the minerals that you would be talking about to work with your ascension process.
Okay. My second quick question was what languages you prefer? Like Hebrew, and I've been kind of familiar with Swahili, and just trying to see what you think on that, what language to use, because I missed the first part of the show. I don't know if you touched up on it.
Okay, yeah, we did mention it for a minute, but it doesn't hurt to say it again. You're going to be looking at Hebrew, because again, Hebrew is a fire language. It's a pyramid language, basically. You're going to be. It's a language of how to deal with the spirit, because again, the pyramid, or the two pyramids are the higher spirit, the lower spirit united inside of the body. So that's what you're looking at. Then you're looking at Tamil and Sanskrit.
Okay.
Then you're looking at
Sanskrit. Okay.
Tamil is Tamil, and then Sanskrit, which came after Tamil. But Tamil is the language of the Dravidian, so it is the language that was being used in Ethiopia. And even those languages, such as Amharic, and even the ancient Native American languages, still show to be the same language that was passed to them. As has been pointed out, that aloha was the word that is similar to Elohim, which was given to the Hawaiian people by who they say was a messenger that came to them and taught them the knowledge of Kuna. So you see worldwide that there was still one core language, mainly the fire language, the spirit language that was used, because it can also, they say that when you know the proper words, it opens up a pathway through the cosmos. Because other than that, because you're doing it through vibrations. As you go to a gate, you vibrate the sound that opens the gate. And the sound is actually vibrating through your body, too, so this allows you to remain completely cohesive as you're going through these levels. And so what you'll be dealing with is the Sanskrit, the Tamil, the Hebrew, and the Mandarin, and the Egyptian. because those are both horizontal and vertical, linear and non-linear languages, but they're supportive. And this is how I'm going to basically shorten things for most people, is that there's a core vibration that exists even within English and all the rest of these languages. And once we sync up the meaning of those core vibrations, then it'll put our ego in check so that it'll know exactly what's real and what's not. And then that will allow it to get to the next level.
Okay, yeah, appreciate that, man. That was a good happy Earth Day present for me, man. The day of my birthday, so I really appreciate that.
Happy birthday. Okay, I do appreciate you calling in and sharing. Okay, so we have one more caller from the 786 area code. You're on the Esoteric Radio.
Yeah, this is me again. Everything been answered. It was just I made a mistake and press 1. But yeah, everything has been said.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and open the line one more time to the brother earlier that said he had one more question. Brother from the 813 area code, I believe you're actually on Esoteric Radio.
Oh yes, I was wondering about the pineal gland in Earth. Where would be the pineal gland of Earth, and what's our connection? How does that all unfold? Like, as we ascend, what happens to Earth? Like, the whole layout of it.
The thing is that what you see is Earth, especially the organic field, is still here. What tends to, if you ascend and you, let's say, leave Earth, where you'll be is still, in retrospect, Earth. And I guess, this was perfect, because this was actually the idea of Earth, which we were supposed to end the conversation with. Let's talk about the idea of Earth. What happens is we talked about earlier how Earth becomes our anchor point. And so in our mind, we believe Earth is here, so thus it is here. And a lot of people believed it. So it's a collective experience. So we're sharing a collective experience with the planet that will always be here as long as someone believes it's here. So, of course, there will be no ending Earth. So that's Earth's way of making sure that it always stays in mind. So what happens is that when we accelerate our frequency, we start to see another Earth, which Earth has already created too. Like, Earth's not as slow as the inhabitants that live on it, or else it could not even host those inhabitants. But when you rise through the frequencies, certain things that can't hold in that frequency, i.e. plastic, are gone. And what remains is light fields of the things that contain that frequency, mainly trees. The first things that was here were the trees, but they're sentient. And so as you keep rising through these fields, you're actually rising through fields of more interconnectedness that have less and less interruption. Because what is the difference between dissension and ascension? What happens to people when they live very negative lives and then they die? They go into more limitation. They go into lower dimensions where a sense is removed. So let's say they have 5 senses and they go down 2 levels, they only have 3. And thus, they'll be mastered over by 4 sense and 5 sense beings. And those beings will master over them to keep them in check, basically. So that's dissension. As you see, there's a large part of this reality that has a lot to do with also being on a descended state, because there are people watching over us and all of these things. But when you ascend, you have less of this kind of control. What you end up doing is going into a field where you're actually allowed to utilize your abilities from a mature state, meaning that they're not concerned of you misusing the ability. And these abilities come with sight. Remember, the higher abilities really just have to do with how far you can see. It doesn't really have like senses and how you feel things cut on a lot earlier, but then after, it's just how much you really have access to, or how far you can really see into the universes. Because whatever you can see, you can tap into and feel what it's experiencing. That's why the soul itself is similar to just an eye traveling through space. So the reality becomes for us is that when we activate this Oversoul, is that everything appears brighter. Like, even as it's gradually activating, you see fruits and things at a different level. Like, it seems like they're greener than they should be. But the interesting part is, as you eat this greener fruit, it tends to affect your body differently than the exact same fruit on a lower frequency. Why? Or the exact same plate on a lower frequency. Because when you feel like something, because you're the originator, you're the creator, everything responds to that. And so when you feel and are really in a high frequency, everything around you is also in that high frequency because it's only responding to how you feel. And that's why we have, once again, this idea of Earth. Earth, it's like a back and forth programming, but it initiates and engages you so fast that you think that it's someone else's idea, Earth. But really, it's your idea. And that's why you can take control over your idea and begin to metamorphosize it. And so that's what we're talking about, brother. We're talking about that it's here still, but what you'll still see is that organic life makes its own choices. So the ones that are in the higher frequency as you're going up will still be there. They'll keep transmuting into other things that are their higher dimensional appearance, until eventually, basically, it becomes you. Versus when you're going lower, you only start to see things as more and more separate than you. And then there begins to be eyes and phantoms and all sorts of stuff all around you. So this is the difference between descension and ascension. And now notice, people are descending in state of mind also. So in the reality, they feel like there's more danger. They feel like there's more things that can harm them coming and closing in around them because their frequency is gradually decreasing when they're descending. However, when you're ascending, you feel like whatever's going to happen just happens. It's not like I'm really going to not exist again. Are you kidding? Because when you really think about it, all the fears and the phobias, we never really actually come in contact. The most that happens is we get a bad dream. Very few people have a vivid experience with negative energy where the negative energy throws them across the room and things of this nature. Very few people. Because in fact, that's what the factions such as the Men in Black and things that do exist. People think that terrorists are just limited to only strapping a bomb. Do people not understand that there are certain people that feel so much hatred toward other countries and things that they go get crazy, weird magic books, and then they do weird rituals and they try to form themselves into another being that would be more formidable to attack these other entities that they have problems with. Now, we're, of course, on the dual plane. So what happens is when they attack, places like the United States also have these psychic soldiers, for better lack of words, that respond to those attacks. And they're very quick, too. So basically, they've taken the duality everywhere. They've taken the duality to space. Because the reality is, do you want to do that? That's what this really becomes, and it's still like climbing a ladder, because even if you want to do the external duality in space, you have to work your way up the ladder. So inside of us, when we want to come into wholeness and collect ourselves with those massive, just massive existence that doesn't have the problems or experiencing the problems that we have and know how to get out of the problems and things that we've experienced because they've been through it also, then that's of course what we're talking about now. And so whether people want to make that choice or not it's going to compress. The time is going to compress, and it's going to force them to make a choice. That's what we're dealing with in 2012. The only thing in 2012, Zion means, I think the word was described is death. That's actually what the word means. Zion means death. So, of course, many people, including myself, have synced Zion to mean something very, very non-pleasant for humanity. But once again, when the mystery or the last piece of hidden knowledge that we've been afraid, the last thing to come out of the woodwork, shows itself and we realize it's not even so bad after all and it was a misunderstanding, then even Zion itself becomes, if it means death, then it was interpreted properly. We didn't like death before. Now that we see that death is just but an entrance between a door, and then you'll die every time you go through a door because you're switching frequencies, then it's over. And so this is also, the fear is over. And so this is what people have to get themselves prepared to do. And this is the only example that I'm showing, which is that you can go from an individual that thinks that they know everything about what's going on in the spiritual world. And you can have figured out a lot of it. But if you're doing it from a dualistic state of mind, it's only going to have a dualistic meaning. And it will be the truth. But is that the truth that you want? Meaning that, like what I said before, you have to be all one or connected with the one in order to be able to connect to the higher powers and the higher spiritual abilities, etc. And then, of course, the Bible says Jesus says you have to unite with me in the one. So in essence, he's telling the truth, but because how the rest of the book goes in the interpretations, it starts to appear to be double talk. That's what they call that. They call it double talk. And this is why they say the serpent has a forked tongue. It's because it has two ways of thinking. It can make you see one way or another. So remember, all these entities exist inside of you. So you can either convince yourself to go out and go on a drinking binge or to never drink again. You have that ability. So it becomes ultimately, overall, what are you doing with this knowledge? And this is what we're leaving the example of what should be done with this knowledge. The planet right now is experiencing a situation that is basically like retarded DNA. So what people that can access this knowledge in common sense have to do in those situations is they have to reflect the original to those people. Just show them the original in your essence, like a human organ. And then that will correct the problem more so than talking to them, arguing with them, fighting against them, introducing them to more dualistic concepts, etc., etc. And so this is how you work with it. But now we gain more and more tools as we increase with the knowledge. Now we have the knowledge of understanding how to deal with the spirit body, our own, how to shape and form it. And this is what we'll be talking about in these next shows. And then how to truly develop the light body and connect it and sync it with the Oversoul for 100% results. Not results that depend on who you are and depend on what you've done and depend on what tribe you're in and depend on who you commit your soul to and all of that. But the basic core principles of how to operate the biomagnetic fields and the different sub-bodies that the body has been endowed with by the creators of the system itself. And what I say in the conclusion of all this, because it now is definitely time for us to be letting go of this call. But what I'll say in conclusion of all of this is that we should understand once again that we were never alone here. Just like we're never not connected. So this will allow you to understand the power of your mind. We believe that we are, so this is what happens. That lets you know the power of your mind. It can easily be turned around to when you get this new system, or it's not new, it's still been around, it's ancient. When you get that system, it will work anyway just as sure as the one that you're using right now, but it will work on a more powerful level. And that's what we're talking about. So I'm just glad to be able to, like I said, introduce this information once again, introduce the codes to the language that allow the crystallization of the body's field to receive its chiseling so that it can light resplendent and activate itself once more into its oversoul being. The experience is pretty much over. Like we did Earth, we enjoyed the sphere. Now it's time for us to actually rise beyond it and to assist others in making that transition also. That is our job and our duty. People should always keep in mind that these phone calls that we have are exclusive to only a certain amount of people, a very minute part of the people on this planet. And so that definitely gives it the ring at times of being something that you have to push forth and you have to graduate with, so that you can help all these individuals that appear at this point to not even be having enough time to transform themselves. And this is what I was saying about the quickening, because the quickening is done through faster forms of communication, such as light and thought. And so what you need to do is, if you see a person, they're like, man, you think of them and you're like, man, they're never going to get it. Like if they got to understand all this stuff that's on the line right now, man, they should have started like last year according to how fast they think. Actually, we have new tools. The tools allow the person to go through this experience faster. Only thing we're going to do is compress the time more and more about how we can get people into connecting with themselves and completely whole again. What I believe is by the end of this, I wouldn't even say the end of this year, but by somewhere in the middle to towards the end part of this year, we'll have it down to when the person makes a decision. Meaning that the moment the person makes a decision, the transformation can begin to take place for them vividly right then. Right now, we have it pretty much to the point where the person has to just go and do certain things, and it would take them about 2 to 3 weeks, and then they will start to vividly experience the activity of their spiritual body. So this is what we're working on. So I'm sure Did that get all your questions answered, brother?
Oh, yes, it did. I mean, the only other thing I was going to talk about was the pineal gland. How vivid does it, allow your dreams to be, or does it make it more lucid, or?
Well, of course, the third eye is also a physical. It's a physical experience, so you can actually feel it. Chakras are a physical experience. When they're activated, you can physically feel them. So what actually happens when you do have access to that third eye is you're walking on a dream, man. It's like the world looks like a fantasy world. That's the only way that I can really explain it. All organic things seem to emit more light than normal, and everything feels very fluffy. So basically, this is what you'll be dealing with. It's beyond the dream. It's beyond just the dream. The dream is like subtle awakening, and when you start to control it more, it's more subtle. If you have an active third eye and you dream, you're like in the dream. Nothing becomes not able to be interfaced with. That's the easiest way to explain it. I guess that's the easiest way to explain it. Nothing becomes not able to be interfaced with, whether it's a tree, whether it's a crystal, whether it's a dream, whether it's a person, whether it's a ghost, whether it's an alien, it doesn't even matter. As long as it really exists, you can tap into its field. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. That's all the questions I had. I guess I'm just really excited about everything. I thank you again for all you do.
Oh, man, no problem. I definitely I'm excited myself. And I did go ahead and mute the line, but I want to let everyone know, hold us in balanced vibration to everyone. We're going to go ahead and let this call go into the rerun so that people can hear the archives and start from the beginning again, because there was a lot of information released there. I did want to let everyone know, of course, we're developing the iPhone and the Android app, so it'll allow you to be able to interface with the resistance. We're, of course, going to be developing out the resistance a little bit more, and we appreciate everyone, not posting in the blogs and things of that nature. Also, in regards to support, if you feel like supporting the resistance, especially during this time that we'll be working on this light language, it's definitely going to take some resources and basically the more resources we have, the faster that we can move. That's really what we're dealing with. And so if you can contribute, we ask that you do contribute. Also, at the end of this call, if you can press 1, it does help the call itself rank, and so more people are allowed to see it when they log into the Blog Talk Radio platform, and that makes them possibly get the information. So once again, I want to say we'll be forward next week for the 2012 show. I'll, of course, be doing a lot of research on this language of light, these fire languages, these water languages, these vertical languages, these horizontal languages, and the core of the vibrational frequencies within those languages in order to give you the access to the process that's needed to awake the crystalline structure within your body so that you can begin your charge and charge forth into the reality, manifesting wholeness for the beings that do exist here that have not yet been able to discover it. Thank you.